Hi everyone, I'm Tally, this is Farrell and we are bored of it, and today we're going to be reviewing Waterfall Park. Now this is a re-implementation of the 1999 game Chinatown. It's for between 3 and 5 players, and this game is all about pure negotiation. Of course there's a board and some components, but the majority of the game is all about the player interaction and how much you can swindle your opponents.
Yeah, so a lot of the game's time is going to be people yelling at each other. So this is a game in which you are now trying to build the world's biggest amusement park. You're trying to build attractions on this lovely island, I guess, tower.
Yeah, why not?
And now what you should know is that we have not played the original Chinatown, so we're going into this fresh face, but we will give you some information on what's changed from what we can see. And you should also know, before we explain how to play, that this was a review copy kindly sent to us by Asmodee Nordics.
So the board is made up of these numbered spaces which represent plots where you can build in the water park. Players are then dealt every round cards which have numbers on them that correlate to these plots. Every round they'll be dealt a certain number, and then they also have to discard some as well. Then they'll reveal their plots that they've decided to keep and then place their ownership markers on the slots to show that they now own that plot. Then they'll take building tiles at random, and it's a different amount every round, and then reveal those, and then players can then start to negotiate. The building tiles are things like bowling alleys, carousels, all of the good things that you might find in a water park. And then during the negotiation phase, anything is up for trading. So plots can be traded for different buildings, money can be involved as well and pass hands. But ultimately, the goal is to build groups of the same type of building and make completed sets, essentially, or completed buildings. The different building types require a different number to be considered complete. So for example, the bowling alley needs 5 tiles to be considered complete, whereas another type of building might only need 3 or 4. So essentially, you're trying to claim enough plots on the board that are together so that you can aim to have completed buildings. You can partially complete buildings every round, which you might decide to do once everything has been negotiated. And the reason why you might do that, either partially build or fully build, is because then you'll go into the income phase. And if you've completed a group of buildings, you're going to get more income, but you do also still get a small amount of income for incompleted building sets. However, then of course the risk is you might not get the remaining plots that you need in order to actually complete those buildings. So there is a bit of a risk if you partially build, maybe then you can't actually get the plots next to it in order to complete it. And then there's 4 rounds of this ongoing, and you'll get dealt new cards, see what new plots you've got, go through trading again to try and get the right ones, and then the player with the most income is the winner.
First off, just for those of you that are interested, just run through a kind of broad overview of the changes from Chinatown. So the first thing you might notice is that there's less sections. There's only 2 in Waterfall Park. There's also less spaces, and this is because there are less rounds. Now you play over 4 rounds. The spaces themselves are also now hexagonal, with 1 space generally having 6 around it, although some others might have less on the edges. And you have the lovely little cards that now show you where the space is. So obviously the biggest thing that has changed will be the theme, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. One final thing to add on is that now each attraction in this game, which I guess were the industries or businesses before, there is now enough tiles to make 2 complete of whatever that tile is, you know, ghost train or ice cream parlor, whatever. As we mentioned in the intro, we haven't actually played the original Chinatown, but what we can say is Waterfall Park, just as a standalone game, it was really delightful. We had an absolutely great time playing it. It's fun, it's interactive, it's silly, I mean, it's lightning quick to get out the rules, get it set up and learn. And it plays in a really good time too, about 40 minutes, although that can go up with more players and more negotiating. I think that's one thing we also really liked. That'll be great at pretty much any player count. We mainly played at 3 and had a blast, so I can imagine it'll only be more raucous at 5. The one thing that really stood out to me that Waterfall Park does really well is how easily it facilitates negotiation. Because in a lot of games, they'll allow negotiation, but sometimes it can be hard for players who aren't of that mindset or used to that type of game to kind of get that going. You know, they never really consider the option because they don't know what things are worth. Whereas it's kind of just naturally built in to Waterfall Park, this negotiation element. And players can very simply come up with trades themselves, which makes the game really flow, even if you have people that aren't really up for negotiation that much, because it might be that you have 2 of something, they have 2 of something, and you've got the missing tile of each. So you say, hey, why don't you give me that teddy bear and I'll give you this ice cream parlor, and it's a completely equal trade. And they're like, yeah, okay. Or, you know, once you get comfortable, you can start hardballing it. And I just thought that was a really wonderful aspect of the game. And this is an aspect which inevitably becomes more interesting the more you play, as you start to learn the rhythm, and you can even make long-term trades. Like in the last game, I said, hey, Tally, you give me this spot this turn, and then I will give you one of my spots, no questions asked, in the future. And that was because I was desperate to make a complete set of tiles. And she also made me pay something, but you can make more interesting trades, which is the point. And it makes the game expand even more.
There's a really interesting balance when it comes to thinking about whether you want to go for complete sets that take up 3 spaces or 5 spaces. This is because, of course, the 3 buildings are easier and more likely quicker to get out, so you can benefit from getting more income from them earlier on for more rounds. But the 5 buildings are going to get you kind of bigger chunks of income, so you have to consider what you want to do there. It's a very tough decision. There's also a really interesting balance between kind of partially building your sets and getting maybe 1 or 2 tiles out on the board, because you also get income for partially built buildings, but then other players kind of know what you're going for and what you need, so you might also lose a bit of negotiating power, or they know what you want and they can kind of bargain with you. Your cards are kind of out on the table. And also you might get stuck when it comes to the plots. So if you didn't secure enough plots in order to complete that set that you've partially built, you might come a bit unstuck. And again, you're going to have to do some tough negotiations with your opponents if they pull those plots. Coming on to that, we also think it's hilarious that you can hate draft the plots, because in that instance that I was just mentioning, maybe someone gets a plot next to you that you really need to complete your set in their drafting, and you have to decide as that person, do I want to take that plot because I know my opponent really needs it, I can see on the board, or should I actually make sure that I'm getting plots that I need for myself, because you always have to discard those cards that you draw every round. So some very tough decisions, very fun decisions, and we think it's really hilarious to be able to kind of annoy other people in the game. Now, this game is not going to set your world on fire. There's nothing particularly innovative here, and the complexity is pretty low, but we think it's still a terrific little package to break out onto the table, and something that's maybe perfect to play with families, or maybe people who aren't so into heavy board gaming, and a perfect game to crack out for Christmas, we would say. One thing to note though is it's probably best to play with people who aren't going to sit and kind of math everything out. For example, you know, sitting and calculating what the net profit might be from making a particular trade, and kind of sitting and calculating all the money they could make by doing a particular action now, and then how much they will get in the future, because it kind of sucks the fun out of it a little bit. And it's supposed to be a game that's kind of lifted from the board. Most of the game is kind of happening with the player interaction around with the players. So if someone's kind of sitting and calculating, it maybe gets a bit boring, is a bit slow, and it's just not really in the spirit of the game. You know, you want it to be poppy and dynamic and just kind of be throwing trade proposals over the table without thinking about it too much. That's just one thing to consider.
Let's wrap up by just covering a few things that we didn't like so much. And these are mostly minor gripes. The game's still very good. But first thing I didn't really like was the money. It's your generic, really not very good quality cardboard little money chits. And I instantly went to get our iron clays to break out and play with, only to find out that the game wants you to keep all your money face down. So it's a surprise at the end of the game who wins, which I'm a little conflicted by, because on one hand, you're supposed to announce how much you get every round. So it's really not that hard to keep track of if you really wanted to. But on the other hand, I kind of, you know, we want to engage in that. So that's just one thing. It would have been nicer if a bit more production had gone into these. The second thing, speaking of production, is the size of the box. There really isn't much need for the box to be as big as it is, considering it's just boards, some tiles and this. And quite a lot of it has gone into kind of making everything have its place, like little inserts, you know, like these carriers. It's just, you know, maybe not everyone has this problem, but we have a lot of games, and when a game could be half the size, if not less, in terms of storage, we'd rather you just take that option at the expense of nice looking storage solutions. The final thing is, for us, the theme. We find it to be really toothless, if we're honest. I don't know why, when they changed the theme, they made it something so bland and generic. The art's not very interesting on the tiles. It's overdone. It's just really, I think it would have been improved if they'd done something interesting. And there's a lot of debate as well from people who didn't necessarily want them to change the original theme, just basically clean up the more questionable art assets and maybe like bits and pieces of it, considering it's based on a real event that did happen. But, you know, I've also heard some people that do like the theme, so it's personal preference, but just our opinion.
So, final thoughts. We really had a lot of fun with this game. We think it's a really fun kind of family game, or maybe kind of even kind of beer and pretzels game. We really enjoy the kind of tough decisions that you have to make when it comes to deciding what plots you want and what tiles you want to go for. So nice, interesting game, but low level complexity, and just, we've said it quite a few times in this review, but just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think we went into Waterfall Park expecting nothing, because we didn't have the nostalgia of Chinatown. We just knew it was supposed to be a good, fun game. And we were just, as we've said, really pleasantly surprised. We recommend it if it sounds like your type of game, if you want something to introduce to the family, maybe to some children, that kind of thing. And we're definitely going to keep it around for a while and play it, and definitely have a few arguments about the value of a ghost train. But that was our review of Waterfall Park, and thanks so much for watching. I'm just glad I got through the review without calling it Water Park.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions, please ask us, and we're happy to let you know. Please subscribe if you found this helpful, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.